Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And you are listening to Studio A, and we have a lovely full moon out there, or going full, so check it out. It's really pretty. And my special guest this evening is Dan Willis. And Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media. A world disclosure event which was asking for a congressional hearing in order to bring forth the witness scientists within the Black projects who can release the technologies that have been hidden for over 60 years that could stop further damage to our planet. But instead, the message was sanitized by a controlled mainstream media. From his personal firsthand experiences and looking into historical indicators that have been purposely omitted from our education system, that reveals the infiltration of unwarranted influences operating behind the secrecy established for our national security system, which they use to control our indoctrination, which forms the public's agreed-upon reality in order to hide their illegal operations, and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality. An ex-radio broadcaster, engineer, and ABC newsman, Dan has taken a keen interest in how the media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on the hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. His articles are entitled, titled Who Controls the Agreed-Upon Reality Through the Mainstream Media, and Why They Fear Disclosing the Truth About the Extraterrestrial Reality. And I believe he can access his information on the webmatrix.net/radio. And we were discussing a world trapped in a lie, I guess is what we're going to call it tonight. So that's the topic of discussion on many levels. So please welcome Dan to the show this evening. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Oh, good. That was quite a mouthful.
I know. I spit it out.
Yeah.
Great.
You can just go to the webmatrix.net, and then people can see the article. A company in Hollywood wanted me to write an article on media control because they knew I was a newsman in the past, and I had a keen interest in that. And, I spent a couple of months researching just recently, and I was shocked. I was shocked at what's been hidden in history, and so I put together like 100-year research on just looking at the timeline of events that have led to our indocrination and what's been hidden purposely in the history and our education. And, it is eye-opening, and I was aware of a lot of the stuff, many years before that, but until I started the research and find out who is exactly controlling this. When CBS did an interview with me after the National Press Club event in Washington, I said, I'm not doing this interview unless I can say that we've got the scientists that can prove that we have a solution, for the energy and environmental crisis. But the lady who was interviewing, she was in tears afterward. She said the higher executives made me cut out that part. And I guess we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more. For sure. Well, they're all being handled and controlled, obviously. But who's really calling the shots with the media, you think?
Well, it's a long, complicated answer to that one. But I love your title we were talking earlier about, A World Trapped in a Lie. And in order to understand who is controlling and why they are controlling, you have to look at you have to go back through history and look at media control started a long time ago, in the 20th century, way back in 1917 when they bought up all the J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Wahlberg. They bought up all the main newspapers way back then, to control the perception of the people. And now, there was in 1984, there was like 50 corporations. Now there's like 4 or 5 that control all that we see and hear and all the mainstream media.
That's very dangerous. That's real dangerous. So how and why did you get involved in the Disclosure Project? Let's start there and talk about that for a little bit.
Okay. Well, when I was in the Navy, I had a high-level top-secret clearance. I worked at the busiest communication facility on the planet. And back in 1969, I had an unusual report of thousands of secret messages I received. A ship was off the coast of Alaska that the USNS ship that was reporting. The crew was witnessing off port bow a brightly glowing reddish-orange saucer, elliptical object coming out of the ocean and shooting straight up into space. Radar operator caught the blips on it. It was estimated going about 7,000 miles per hour. This was going to the Chief of Naval Operation. It was a priority message classified as secret. I looked in the newspapers afterwards in San Francisco, and I thought, wow, what could possibly be glowing reddish orange and looking like a flying saucer coming out of the ocean? I used to love Saturday afternoons when I was a kid. The science fiction theaters, and look at the space movies and stuff like that.
Right.
And then, I'm actually getting a report about that. Then, many years later, I was with my brother going up through the mountains in Arizona, and I pulled over to the side after many hours of driving, and he got out and stretched, and he saw a saucer coming up from Mexico, and he yanked me out of the truck, and he said, look. And as I looked above, it was about 100 feet above us and about 50 feet in diameter, a glowing disc. And, I've seen them several times, so whether they're made on this planet or another planet, I finally got it in my mind, these things do exist. And just studied over the years, and then trying to figure out, I keep hearing different stories about people and things, it was like glitches in the reality, but the government, continually denies evidence. And then I heard that, Dr. Greer was going to go to Washington with all these witnesses that were like high-level captains, launch officers, high levels in the FAA, all going to Washington with this evidence. And I happened to kind of crash a cocktail party afterward, and I was holding an hors d'oeuvre tray, and he said, "Oh, could I have one of these?" And I said, "Oh, by the way, I had a top secret clearance, and I had a." And then what happened was one of the witnesses kind of chickened out, and there was an opening there, and I said, "Well, if it's appropriate, I'd be honored to help support what you're doing." And so I ended up going to Washington, but the night before going to Washington, I was like tossing and turning before getting on the flight the next morning, and I had this extremely lucid dream, and I became aware of all the witness testimonies, and it was like hundreds of witness testimonies, and unbelievable information that was going to be disclosed to the whole world. And I thought, my God, how is this ever going to not affect everything? And in the dream, a MJ-12 operative got up after everybody gave their testimony, and they discredited everybody, and everybody had their mouths dropped. They couldn't believe it, in the dream. And what happened was I just walked up to him, and I shook his hand. I said, "God, you've done an incredible job keeping the secret all these years, And then all of a sudden there was like this awareness that what these people are doing to the rest of the people are basically doing to themselves, because we're all, science, as showing that we're all interconnected. There's no separation between everybody." Right. And they didn't need an MJ-12 operative to discredit it. The mainstream media effectively sanitized out that there's alien base on the other side of the moon, that we have 57 different species, that we've been shooting them down, and that we've had technologies for over 60 years, that we haven't needed nuclear power, haven't needed oil or coal, that there's been essentially the government's been infiltrated, and there's a lot of indications of that.
Right, and who are they infiltrated by, though? I mean, who's really doing this? And I understand that concept of the breakaway society, but it's obvious to me that this has been about control and manipulation for a very long time. I mean, everybody's clear who's done the research that we have this technology, that whether it's been reverse engineered or it's extraterrestrial. So it's obviously about a control and manipulation, but I really like to know who the hell, excuse my French, these people are that obviously are just not very many who think that they can control the mass collective on a global scale.
Well, you have to look at, if you go back through history about, who these people are, you look at the people that funded Hitler, and, there's always been these high-level financial elite that have financed certain operations. Mm-hmm. And, through the years, they have effectively gained control of the mainstream media and education. Back in when we supposedly won the war with the Germans back in 1945, and in 1946, the Rockefeller Foundation came in and effectively had the complete history of World War II rewritten to hide all the connections with the banking elite and the Nazis, and also the occult connections with the Nazis.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's one big thread in the fabric of a lot of insane agendas, if you ask me. I mean, we've been dealing with this for a very long time, and now we're seeing that everything's come to fruition, and it's not very pretty, at least from what I've noticed across the board here on this planet. I mean, we've got a lot of deception going. We've got covert technology that could be used for the best and the highest good of mankind, and it's not. We've got breakaway societies that are probably not even on this planet, off-world. I mean, I don't know what your impression is of that, but I'm pretty much convinced that there's like a skeleton crew here on this world. What's left of the covert groups, the real high-tech covert people. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, apparently there has been, if you look back through the historical timeline of the whole thing, the Nazis did connect with an off-world group. Even, Dr. Oberyn and von Braun both talked about they had help from beings from other worlds they talked about. Mm-hmm. And, back in 1938, they sent out huge expeditions down in Antarctica to build a huge, underground secret base down there. They, after the war, there was like all the top elite scientists were missing. They didn't come across in Project Paperclip. Mm-hmm. 250,000 Germans that were unaccounted for, including people who got killed during war and everything. Also, over 100 of their U-boats, their most advanced models as well, were all missing. And then in 1947, Truman had James Forrestal, who was the Secretary of State, have Admiral Byrd, who was a 33rd degree Mason, go down and with a whole military armada to try to destroy the Nazi base down there. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is when we had infiltrated elements. Alan Dulles, who was in the CIA, had what he did was, when just before the end of World War II, he met with General Reinhard Gehlen, who was the head Nazi spy, and they had basically taken all the Soviet intelligence and hid it in microfiche up in the Bavarian mountains, and so they used it as a bargaining instrument in order to infiltrate into the CIA. So they had about 3,000 Nazi spies into the CIA. So you basically had two CIAs. You had one that was hunting Nazis down, the other one was recruiting them. So you have these two elements that are going on. And what happened was the entire process at that point led to one second here. get my thoughts organized here on this whole thing.
It's a lot of information.
Okay. There's so many details on this whole thing. It's like trying to put it together in one cohesive thought to try to convey it to everybody. But what they did is effectively they infiltrated the CIA, and the CIA, using the national security, was able to conduct operations in complete secrecy. So they had this breakaway civilization in which they created this false threat of the Soviets, of which von Braun said that was one of the threats that they were going to have a false flag about, as well as terrorists and extraterrestrials is the final card they were talking about. And so
that sounds like Project Bluebeam almost when they talk about the extraterrestrials, though, don't you think, or no?
I'm not familiar with Project. I've heard of Project Bluebeam.
Right. Well, basically, it's a false flag, basically engineered, quote unquote, ET, something that they've created to create a false flag to skew the masses into believing they're actually having a real extraterrestrial contact, when in fact it's actually an engineered agenda that's been happening in the underground for a long time with hybridization of extraterrestrials and things like that.
Well, the witnesses at the press club, they testified, said that, back in 1988, like Mark McCandish, his colleague Brad Sorensen, actually saw the alien reproduction vehicles that were in Norton Air Force Base that were hovering off the ground. They developed anti-gravity craft back in the 40s, and they had huge facilities. That there was documentation that showed that there was like 9 saucer factories that were, 8 of them were relocated mostly to Antarctica, someplace in Brazil, another one up in Norway, that they're saucer factories. And in fact, in around 1944, there was 2 Nazi U-boats that were sunk that were carrying, one was carrying 37 tons, the other one 67 tons of mercury. And mercury, we know that the alien reproduction vehicles use that as an anti-gravity mass canceling effect. And also, Himmler was interested in searching through esoteric truths and ancient knowledge all over the world, and the ancient Indian Vermatas, they utilized mercury as well for anti-gravity. So, that's a lot of thermometers.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
67 tons, so both were synced. In fact, one's causing an environmental problem up in Norway that's leaking out. So they definitely had the anti-gravity craft, so they could pull that off if they wanted to.
Absolutely, yeah. I think a lot of the early ETs or the witnesses who saw the UFO, I think it was actually ours engineered or the reverse engineered craft. But that's very interesting. But, it strikes me as, I look at all the things that have happened throughout history and how everything's been censored and edited according to man's version of history. So it tells me that I wonder if the masses are actually really, can they handle the truth? And I used to think they could, but I'm beginning to think because they're so lulled and so asleep right now, that I don't even know if they could handle the truth about having our history rewritten before our eyes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's criminal.
Totally.
I don't think anybody should have the right to falsify history. I mean, that's totally criminal. And some of the reporters there were saying that the government's having me falsify, giving me like Amber Lyons on CNN was saying the government's putting lies into my reporting about what's going on. What happened was they brought 3,000 Nazi spies into the CIA, and Allen Dulles also 5,000 Nazis, they were able to rewrite all their identification papers and got them off the hook, and they, went through Argentina and South America. Mm-hmm. And so you have this whole infrastructure that's still in place and operating. The Nazis had planned. They knew that the war was coming to an end. They knew it wasn't going good, and so they had a fallback plan. They called it Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare, which means to go in psychologically, have psychological warfare against the United States and operate from an underground after the supposed victory of Germany surrendering. And so they've been effectively, they got into our intelligence community, the CIA and NSA, and have, the CIA is primarily the ones that control the distribution of all the information, all the different networks, mm-hmm. They are basically, I used to be an ABC newsman. I used to read the off of UPI and American Press, off the teletypes, you pull it off and you read what you're told, right? Mm-hmm. And so all the, ABC, NBC, CBS, all the major affiliates all across the United States are all being fed the distributed information. And that information is, tied in with thousands of think tanks that are tied into the Tavistock Institute in London that basically works on the psychological aspect of preparing information to work in support of the agenda. Mm-hmm. So, essentially, who controls the mainstream media? Yes, the CIA.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Everybody knows that. Yeah.
Well, it seems like they're controlling everything. The bottom line is, I think those guys are the ones that really have been calling the shots across the board, across the globe. I mean, they're training people in foreign countries to do their bidding. This whole game playing, and it's just, I don't know about you, but I'm just tired of it. And unfortunately, it seems like as the American people, I mean, we'd like to just opt out of it. And I don't see a way out.
Well, Alan Dulles was a major player in all this. He even assisted, Hitler and escaping, mm-hmm. Faked his suicide. And Himmler did too. He faked his suicide as well. And Alan Dulles was very instrumental. In fact, 1950s, he started Operation Mockingbird, which started all the relationships with all the media. They had this plan a long time. They had this way before the end of World War II to infiltrate into the United States. And it's a perfect situation that's set up because Truman set it up, the CIA, with no congressional oversight. So they can do anything they want behind, whatever it is. It's, can't know that, because it's behind national security. So they use this national security as the blanket for everything they do. When Kennedy fired Alan Dulles as the CIA director for his activities that he was doing, and that, there was Kennedy tried, Eisenhower tried to warn as well, that we basically be infiltrated. General Lovkin, one of our witnesses, talks about, he got sold out to the corporations, and we know that, the Nazis back in 1944, they took all the huge amounts of money that they gathered and bought hundreds and hundreds of corporations in the United States and the U.S. Mm-hmm. And throughout the world, and essentially our legal government lost control back in 1954, and Kennedy was trying to look inquiring into that. There was a interesting top secret Majestic burnt memo in which MJ1, the Majestic 12 group, was Alan Dulles, by the way. And they said, we cannot allow him to look into our activities, and we must stop this, And we know shortly after that he tried to get the files of this. He was going to stop the Vietnam War, so I wouldn't have to go. Mm-hmm. He was going to, get off the Federal Reserve, and he was going to release the extraterrestrial information. Mm-hmm. And so, you know what happened to him shortly after that.
Right, yeah, eliminate the competition for sure on so many different levels. Well, they're playing global domination without a doubt. MJ12, you mentioned something, MJ1. Is there, did each one of the members have a number? Is that what that was about?
Yeah, each member has a number.
Okay.
At that time, MJ1, but which, by the way, the original group that was created because of General Twining's request to Truman were all, good red-blooded American guys, and that eventually what happened was Rockefeller, who funded, by the way, Eisenhower's election, had him. There was a secret executive memo that basically created a new MJ12, and of course, you have Rockefeller, you have you had Alan Dulles, you have all the people that are the main control elements or Bilderberg group type people, are now in control of everything having to do with this. So, yeah, Alan Dulles was MJ1, and each one had an MJ number to him, and he was like heading it, and so there was a definite conspiracy to stop Kennedy from exposing their operations.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's too bad these guys aren't fighting the good fight, huh? And we wouldn't have any problems on this world. Unfortunately, it seems to me like they're more insidious.
Well, it's breakaway civilization. You can imagine the advanced technologies of, they funneled, the whole Soviet thing was a lie. They funneled like $8 trillion into, these black projects that go in. While they're doing that, while they have advanced, faster than light craft, you have, and, free energy and everything you can imagine. As Ben Rich said in 1993, said anything you can imagine. We already have the technology to take ET home, and there was an error in the equations, and we figured it out, and all that. Anything you can imagine, they've got in these black projects, while at the same time they're retarding all of humanity. Afterward, I have a technical background, so I volunteered to go with Professor Loiter. Dr. Greer set up a corporation, Advanced Energy Research Organization, which we had about 300 different inventors on a database, just trying, since the congressional hearing was denied, to bring these scientists forth. By the Bush administration. We were trying to look in the civilian sector to bring these technologies, which by, earthly people, have come up with over Unity type devices.
Right.
And so, I was flying around the planet. I was down in Dominican Republic with this one inventor that had an energy device that it was putting out about 500 watts using a particular configuration. And he was told, it was just before I flew down there with a professor, two CIA guys told him, if this works, you're dead. And so we got down there, and the whole device was taken apart. And he said, "Oh, I have a much better design." And so anyway, I've met with dozens of different, some people completely brilliant, written advanced calculus on the fluid dynamics of electron flows, and had a little box that was producing about 140 watts of power. And he was about ready to go to Europe. And he was found sloped over dead in the airport parking lot. I was one of 6 technical advisors. Everybody had several PhDs in science. I was the only one without a PhD, but I've had a lot of science background in unusual areas. And one of our, Eugene Maloff, he was murdered just before releasing something. So, they've taken extreme action. And, a lot of inventors, we've heard all the horror stories that they come in and clean out their laboratories.
Right.
And a lot of them had national security acts slapped on them, because there's been over 5,000 patents that have energy solutions to the world that have been suppressed by the CIA with national security acts. slapped on them. So they want us to keep using these dangerous nuclear power plants. They want us to keep using the polluting oil with the oil spills and coal for the air. They want us to keep using these while they, on the other hand, have this advanced civilization that's broken away, as Richard Dolan uses that terminology, that anything you can imagine in all areas of science, genetics, in health, while we, gulp pharmaceuticals, they, they, I'm sure have higher level, energetic sciences that alleviate problems.
Right. That's really pathetic when you think about it. So the end game would be what? Just exterminate the mass collective and then keep a small group of people for what their own little slave race? I mean, what do you think the end game really is?
I don't know what the end game is. It seems as though we're getting a lot of opportunity to spiritually evolve, that's for sure, with all these challenges.
I hear your kitty, by the way. A cat?
Oh, yeah, it's my cat.
Oh, okay, no, it's okay. I was just wondering if it needed in or out or something like that. But yeah, no, it's just really interesting, though, when I look and see they obviously have an agenda. Is it just to keep everybody just plain dumbed down and so stupefied that they don't evolve past where they're supposed to be in consciousness? It makes me wonder what exactly is their trip? What's their problem? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of us here who are very awakened to this and we're very onto it, and we're trying to figure out ways to disable this whole agenda.
Yeah, there's, all you can do is speculate at that things. There's a lot of facts that definitely indicates that this is a true reality. There's no question about that. The thing is that, it appears they use the population on this planet as nothing more than a resource for their activities. And it's it's like a disease in the body. When you look at the root cause of what a disease is, then you can alleviate it. Because it's not true what you don't know can't hurt you, because of what you don't know can hurt you. And the only thing that their main power is secrecy, and our main power is disclosure. And it's just like, you take a pharmaceutical to try to alleviate a problem. All you're doing is masking the symptoms, because the problem will keep on resurfacing again, because you haven't dealt with the core issue.
Right.
And the core issue, that is the reason they continually to, that's why, all the petitions of thousands of people saying, hey, we know we've got hundreds of witnesses. Dr. Greer, when back in '93, when Clinton had an inquiry about the UFO files, he had a CIA director look into it, and he was denied access. A CIA director being denied access. So the CIA director was frustrated. He couldn't go through the normal channels. The channels have been compromised within our national security structure. And so that's why he sought out Dr. Greer, because he was the head of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And so Dr. Greer had a private meeting, brought, a huge stack of papers and things that, proving the reality of this. And without even looking at it, the director said, I know the subject's real. I'm trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. And then, he became aware of the gravity of the situation, and so he met with some military advisors, and they realized that, you can't come out with just a single witness because they're usually quiet, silenced, or discredited. And so the only way to do this is to gather hundreds of witnesses. So from '93 to 2000, he gathered over 450 witnesses, which are, in the military, intelligence, and corporate sectors that are, high-level people that are, high-level top-secret clearances, that are admirals, astronauts, generals. And he had his life threatened, to go to the National Press Club with these witnesses, of which, 21 were, willing to go before 22 cameras of the main media to testify before each one of us saying we're willing to testify under oath before a congressional hearing.
So basically,
what we're saying.
Right. So were you concerned about breaking your national security oath? Obviously, what happens after you do that?
Well, the elements that can't cite the law that are illegal. Mm-hmm. You've got operating elements within our legal government that have broken the law and are operating outside of the law, and they cannot use the rule of law against us. And
right.
According to Daniel Sheehan, one of the witnesses that is our legal counsel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's lawlessness. I think that's why they really can't enforce a lot of these executive orders or anything else. Everything feels criminal. It looks criminal. It smells criminal. And so how can people follow a criminal act in any form? It seems like it's just across the board, but I do give you a lot of credit for doing what you've done. And you said, was your life threatened?
No one. There are a lot of people have had their lives threatened. There's been a lot of threats. A lot of murders happened, but no one, to my knowledge, since we did the National Press Club, has been threatened. They really didn't need to, because the mainstream media effectively sanitized the message out. The government will continually say, they deny evidence. There's no evidence whatsoever. Even though you have like hundreds of witnesses, along with supporting official documentation to prove it. Mm-hmm. I tried to get documentation on mine, but through the Office of Naval Intelligence, but they said I had enough information to pinpoint it, but they said, it's been destroyed. So, unlike some of the other witnesses that had many papers, and even the head of FAA, the CIA confiscated, sworn him to secrecy. But they forgot that he had backups of everything, and so he brought all his backup information and brought that to the press club. But it doesn't matter, if you have a 5,000 witnesses, it doesn't matter. They control the mainstream media, mm-hmm. and the people just think that there's just a group that's wanting to have a congressional hearing based on that we are not alone and UFOs are real, which isn't going to gain any attention.
Right. Unfortunately,
there's no impact on the average person's life. That just an intellectual curiosity about UFOs. It has nothing to do with what the Disclosure Project was doing, which was to release the technologies that
right.
have been suppressed.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're talking about the technological aspects of it, which is driving these whole anomalies, the things that people are saying. But, you have the mainstream, and then, of course, you have other people who are, I don't even like to call us alternative media. I mean, we're the real media, and we're coming out with real data, opposed to this garbage you're seeing on mainstream. So there is a collision going on right now, and so far as beings like us out there putting the truth out and pushing forward, but still, we've got... we need more on our side, in my opinion. We need people who can pull really good punches, to help us and assist us in breaking through these barriers, because I see a self-destruct course here on this world. I mean, unless we get things turned around, this planet looks like it's being sabotaged. Now, I don't know what your impression is of what you've seen from day to day about the world.
Oh, it's escalating. Yeah. It's escalating more and more. And,
mm-hmm.
You look at all the media, the CIA has a very close liaison connection with Hollywood and movies and everything. In fact, all the science fiction movies that we've ever seen about extraterrestrials ever since 1951, the day they were stood, has all been manipulated by the CIA script to form the impression in our subconscious, the association with a lot of fear based with the extraterrestrials. You can see that through all the movies.
Right.
And then you look at television. You look at the Tavistock discovered that people who are constantly in fear and stress, they're more submissive to the government, and they find that breaking the bonds of relationships, having people not kind of floating without stability. There's a lot of deception, and so you look at the television and you look every which way possible through crime dramas. It seems like it's the kill or hurt human program, being constantly played. In fact, China has a whole industry set up to take out a lot of the violence in American movies because they believe it has a negative effect upon their society. And we know that humans see, humans do. Humans have a tendency to mimic, and you keep bombarding, and you notice more and more in the television and movie media. You see more graphic violence and more torturing. It's right. Escalating all the time, and all this is all part of. It seems like of steering the pot, so to speak, to bring it to a head. And exactly. I don't know what the plans they have on the board, but there's definitely influences of hidden hands behind the scenes.
Right, yeah. There's total entrainment going on, whether it's, like you mentioned, through mainstream television or whatever. There's definitely programming. And, of course, people have been subjected to programming for a very long time. Then you've got the covert technological programs, too, that run. So it seems like it's rough water to navigate in for everybody here on this world, without a doubt. So why do you think that we can't get anybody who's high up, like even a president, to even acknowledge some of this stuff that's going on with opening the door to showing people what the covert technology is about and UFOs?
Well, it seems that up until Kennedy was probably the last president, according to astronaut Edgar Mitchell, one of our witnesses. He said that he was one of the last presidents to be briefed on the extraterrestrial issue. They effectively have their people in place, and you have to wonder about all the connection. Kennedy, before he left office, he spoke of warning messages. He talked about these influences that come in and infiltrate and expand their influence, and he warned about the secrecy and the secret societies, and that the dangers of secrecy far outweigh the benefits of the secrecy. And then, he even just before, pretty close to near where they assassinated him, he made a statement that the high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy America's freedom, and before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of his plight. He's making statements like this just before he was murdered. So pretty much they have their people in place, and you have to look at all the people that have been associated with high levels, the Freemasons, and you look at Skull and Bones, of which Prescott Bush and George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush were all members of, and all sworn to secrecy. So, which came basically from a German Bavarian death cult that came over into United States. And it's kind of interesting. I've been trying to look back through my own family history. It turns out my grandfather, my mother told me, was a 33rd degree Mason, and I have the documented proof of that. And his father was a 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite. And we come from some French royalty bloodline and stuff like that. And I don't have any idea what all that means, but I'm trying to understand some of my own family background in all this. But apparently, there's something of that's connected with the secret societies. I studying the Rosicrucians, since 1976, and it's just about consciousness and things. And they say there's certain inner circles are brought into, once you have a certain degree of awareness of, the mechanisms of consciousness and reality, once you go through some of the ancient teachings that came back from the time of Akhenaten and the mystery schools back in Egypt, that they, recruit them. into this. And you look at just about every president had some affiliation with the Masonic orders or affiliates, except for Lincoln and Kennedy. And we know what happened to both of them.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I come from the high-ranking Masons, too, on my mother's side, Scottish Rite. So I do understand, and I've done enough research to understand that at least my ancestors were decent folk, and they did good things. So, but I do know there's been an infiltration of corruption, which means, whenever you have a lot of power and wisdom and enlightenment, something's going to come in and infiltrate it and take it down to the lowest level. And I think that's what happened with the Masons. I think it got distorted and perverted, and it's twisted. I'm not saying all of them are, but I think it's very much a tainted mix right now of doing some really bad things. But I'm not just talking about them, because it seems to me like all religions have taken that and twisted it and converted it and contorted it into something to control, manipulate, and judge and persecute each other. So it's just out of control.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Masons do a lot of good things, and nothing but benevolent teachings and Rosicrucians and all this stuff. The thing is that, Adam Weishaupt, talked about, back in 1776 about, he was a Freemason, and they were, in Europe, they were trying to fight him, because he was getting into, basically into the Freemasons and infiltrating it and creating his own, Illuminati branch, you could say.
Right, a spin-off, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, they do that. And they operate in secrecy, so it's hard to, and everybody's sworn to, death secrecy oaths, so it's hard to, and there's a lot of control elements involved, so, it's hard to really know what, but there's a heck, like they say, I can't see the fire, but there's a hell of a lot of smoke. Right, exactly. Too much smoke, if you ask me. And that's across the board. Of course, you've got, I can go on and on about these different religions and things like that are just completely, I don't know, they're all warped, if you ask me. I think everything needs to be reset on this world and transcended to the highest level, which is pure energy and pure consciousness, and none of this emotional, mental stuff that's spinning out of control here. But there's a lot of work to be done on this world. And honestly, what they've done and what I've looked at and what you're telling me, even with your own research and experience, it just tells me that there's been too much false data that has basically poisoned the minds of the masses to a point where it's almost irreversible at this point. Everybody, they talk about re-education camps. We need to be re-educated and deprogrammed from the lies. On a global scale.
Yeah, everything's been manipulated. Men on this planet manipulate things to control things, and so everything is up for grabs for that. For especially you have a lot of power and money.
Right.
You can manipulate things, religions, governments, anything. You can. But I agree with you. I think there does need to be a complete reset because, Hitler said, give me a child, 7 years of age and he's mine for life. That's what's happened is everybody who is, the Weltanschauungskrieg of the Nazis or worldview warfare, which means to completely control all your perception of reality, has effectively worked because as each generation, you have to think about it, every generation is born into this false agreed upon reality that is based on lies.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of us are awakened to the fact that it is a lie. I always knew when I was growing up things weren't right, but a lot of people are just now getting up to speed about what's been happening. But still, the truth has been presented to a lot of people who listen. I'm not talking about the listeners of this show, but I'm talking about people in general, and they just scoff it off and they laugh it off, or they're afraid to embrace the truth. So it tells me that maybe society is just not willing to learn the truth, and nor do they care. Maybe they're just comfortable in their own little worlds, but those worlds are, they're colliding, they're crashing, and they're falling away. So where are they going to go after that? And I did want to ask you what your impression was of this whole Ebola situation and all these programs and flags that they seem to be running. What does your insight tell you?
I'm sorry, Solaris, on what again?
Well, on the Ebola thing, that they're all making this big, it seems to me like a big false flag on so many different levels. I think they're playing it out of proportion. It's obviously done deliberately. We obviously hold a patent to it, so it's engineered. So what is your impression of what this whole agenda is about here in the U.S. with that?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Like we were talking about, the fire and the smoke. A lot of smoke of Monsanto putting in a huge amount of money into, an Ebola treatment. pharmaceutical, and that I like to watch the news from a very objective standpoint. Whenever I look at the news, I look at it more for indicators. Thank God we have this alternative media, so we have different sources to compare.
Right.
But you see a lot of different things in the news about the CDC, whoops, they had a little mistake here and this and that, and all of a sudden you see this, I had an anthrax scare over here. You have these little things, kind of like prepping. Little bits of prepping for biological type of things. So,
right.
they want to reduce the population, and biochemicals, one avenue they can do it. But who knows? I don't have any idea.
Right. It's definitely a distraction, if you ask me. I mean, to me, it seems like they're just pulling all sorts of stunts to create a distraction, and the smoke screen, but that is a form of bioterrorism, and actually, it was very negligent of them to bring those two people over here to the U.S. I don't care what anybody says. That's very negligent, and to me, that's just an act of bioterrorism, if you ask me. So I see it as a distraction. I'm not taking it to a point where I feel like it's anything really people need to be so paranoid about. But we are heading for a break real quick. Everybody, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Dan Willis.